This king coming out of Egypt.
This king coming out of Egypt. In other words, the author, I get goosebumps on this. This king coming out of Egypt, who's going to have an exalted kingdom, who's going to be raised higher than Agag, is described in the same way that Yahweh is described as he brought Israel out of Egypt. So now this king who's coming in the last days is described as Yahweh. Welcome to this episode of Open Scripture, where we seek to sharpen the way the church reads her foundational texts. My name is Tracy McKenzie, professor of Hebrew and Old Testament. This is Nick Nail, student and worship leader at the church where we attend. Well, Nick, last week we really got into it, and we kind of started with this first word of the Bible, which is translated in the beginning, and noted how that really was like a hyperlink to really the Messiah, to
the
Jesus.
First word talks about Jesus.
Very first word points to or is associated with the Messiah, the son of Judah, Jesus, we would say eventually, right? Moreover, the first word, and this is even a stronger link or more directly associated, it has connections to the last days, what we would call eschatology. That's just a kind of a fancy word for God talk about the last days when this king, would show up.
Right.
So I think that was probably a lot. We, in a sense, covered the whole book of Genesis with that, but it definitely got us going. One other thing that we covered was this notion of the last days and how that really points to or influences the way we read Scripture as literally about the days in which we live, right? So Scripture really is about you because it's about the church. It's about the people of God who would become the people of God in the last days. And of course, that's when this Lion King shows up and people begin to obey him. And we know the New Testament opens up with this idea of the king showing up, being in the last days. I think of Peter's speech in Acts 2 about how he says, in the last days, the Spirit, will be poured out. He's quoting Joel there.
Okay. So the phrase that you use, the Bible is for you and the Bible is about you, it doesn't mean it's not about Jesus. It's also about Jesus.
Sure.
It's also about us. It's about all these things, and we see that the Bible is for you. The Bible is about you, and we can see that from the very beginning.
Yes. In other words, we could say that the Pentateuch was not written. The Pentateuch, again, I just remember Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, this first large book. The Pentateuch was really written about this people of God in the last days, and it is for that people of God in the last days. So the first generation, of course, never read it. The second, maybe third generation, and then later, of course, in the history of Israel, they would read it and would hope in this king who would come.
Yeah.
So in that sense, the Bible is for you and about you. Not in the sense where, we might apply every passage as a devotional thought where we're the hero of the story. That's not what we're talking about, of course. So that really takes us through that idea. Now, one more thing that we should probably talk about that we covered just really as an idea was this framework. We could call it a framework, or you could call it a panoramic view. If you think about a panoramic picture that goes maybe from, far left of frame to far right of frame, 360 degrees, 200 degrees, whatever. In a sense, what we're doing here in these first episodes is giving us a panoramic of this book that we call the Pentateuch. Another way we could look at this as like a skeleton, what a skeleton does for the body, this sort of presentation of the Pentateuch does for this book, because we talked about these 3 poems that come at key moments. The phrases used in the last days. They all talk about this Lion King who would rule over the nations. And so there we might think of like 3 kind of, bones, if you will, or large bones. And it also has association with this first word of the Pentateuch in the beginning. So from that standpoint, it's like a skeleton.
So the reason you're doing that is so that we can read the first 5 books together as one whole and not treat them as individual books that we kind of study and walk through. It's meant to be all 5 together. So it's really just one. It's not 5.
That's right.
Technically.
That's right. It's a great point. And this is going to have profound implications, as hopefully you can already see that it does, on how we read. Because we are looking for really the intentionality, the intentional design that this book has. And we're going to talk a lot more about this, I think, about a later episode where we want to get into biblical interpretation. We'll do that, but we'll kind of leave that idea for now.
Great.
So, hey, one of the key feedbacks or the feedback that we received from many of you who have watched our pilot episode is, like, hey, we were a bit bewildered. Could you give us maybe a summary idea of what the podcast is going to be? And so here it is. Here's the summary idea of this podcast. We're going to be in Numbers 24, verses 1 through 9. And the main idea is this king who would come in the last days and subjugate the nations. And he is likened unto the king of Israel, Jehovah, the Lord, right? Yahweh. So that's what this episode's about. Okay. Numbers 24, 9 verses, not the whole book of Genesis like we did last time, 9 verses. I think it'll probably be bewildering enough for us anyway. So we probably should start then at verse 1.
In Numbers 24. So I'm going to be reading the English. You're reading the Hebrew.
Yep.
And you're going to point out why it's important to have access or to know the Hebrew text.
Yeah.
But we can still compare our English translations and see how all that.
That's right. We're going to be in the English translations again. One other thing I actually want you to do, just so we can see it, is I want you to start with Numbers 24:14.
Okay.
And where your English version says something like in the future or in days to come, just read Ba'acharit Hayamim, in the last days. So go ahead and read that, and then I'll just go ahead and let you read Numbers 24, 1 through 3 right after that.
All right. So Numbers 24:14 says, this is the CSB.
Okay.
Now I'm going back to my people. But first, let me warn you what these people will do to your people in the future.
All right. And instead of in the future, we're going to read in the last days.
So let me warn you what these people will do to your people in the last days.
In the last days. That's that word that is the opposite of reshit, acharit.
Right.
Okay. All right, very good. Numbers 24:1.
24:1 says, since Balaam saw that it pleased the Lord to bless Israel, he did not go to seek omens as on previous occasions, but turned toward the wilderness. When Balaam looked up and saw Israel encamped tribe by tribe, the Spirit of God came on him, and he proclaimed his poem, the oracle of Balaam, son of Beor, the oracle of the man whose eyes are opened, the oracle of one who hears the sayings of God, who sees a vision from the Almighty, who falls into a trance with his eyes uncovered. How beautiful are your tents, Jacob, your dwellings, Israel.
All right. So that was into verse 5. Okay, so if we could just stop it from verses basically, 3 and 4, this is the introduction of Balaam's prophecy. And I just want us to very quickly go over to the second part, because we're going to see that the second part of the poem here begins the same way in verse 15 of this chapter. We're not going to get into this, but we'll see really the second half of this, which we'll cover in our next episode. But it's really the same thing, right? It's the exact same thing. So we see here there's kind of two halves. Now, we also need to, basically know the story of Balaam here. And I think most of our readers are familiar with this. Most of our listeners are familiar with this. That Balaam, of course, is this non-Israelite prophet who's known in the ancient Near East, actually known outside of the Bible. And Balak, the king of Moab, had seen Israel as they came out of Egypt into the wilderness, and they were camping literally down below him. Balak and now Balaam are kind of up in the mountains, up in the hills, and they see Israel literally encamped by the thousands and thousands and thousands before them. And Balaam is scared to death. And so he hires Balaam, this prophet, to come and curse Israel. And of course, that is not what happens.
Right.
All right. So this is really kind of the introduction. That's what's going on in the chapter. And I should also say that Numbers 24 really is going to refer all the way back to the beginning of the Exodus account in Exodus 1. So we could also just keep in mind, of course, we have the book of Genesis and the book of Deuteronomy. And then, of course, those are kind of the outer frames, the bookends, if you think about it, if you think like that way, of the Pentateuch. And then Exodus through Numbers is a literary unit.
I think it's also worth mentioning, for those who don't know who Balaam is, it's the story with the guy and the talking donkey.
That's right.
That's everyone at least knows about the talking donkey.
That's right. The talking donkey. And again, there's actually a great deal of irony there. Because part of the irony here, again, Balaam's a non-Israelite. And just in case Balaam or we think it's a big deal for a prophet to prophesy like this, part of the point of this story is God can make a donkey talk, right, and give the word. So anyway, there's lots of irony going on here in this story. Now, what I want to do, and again, I'd like to do it fairly briefly here, is as you read verse 5 here, you said, how beautiful are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, Israel. Why don't you go ahead and read verse 6, but only verse 6, and we'll make a point here.
They stretch out like river valleys, like gardens beside a stream, like aloes the Lord has planted, like cedars beside the water.
All right, so again, very simply, Balaam here is just talking about Israel. Because again, in the whole story leading up to this, Israel was camped before them. They were up on the hills looking down. Balak was scared. And
so he's saying that Israel is stretched out like the waters.
Israel stretched out like the waters.
Okay.
That's right. That's right. And that's what he's seeing here so far, right? It's like your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. He's talking about the nation of Israel camped before them. Now, in verse 7, however, there's going to be a switch take place, and it won't be immediately obvious. I'm going to have you read verse 7, and then we can talk about a few of the versions here. Go there if we want to. Verse 7.
Water will flow from his buckets, and his seed will be by abundant water.
All right. So again, we could think about, where did the his come from? Because we're talking about Israel. All right, we're talking about Israel and Jacob. We're talking about the numerous people camped down below. And most of the English versions say his here.
Yeah.
And indeed, that's what the Hebrew is, right? The Hebrew has a singular his here. There is one version, and I hate to even name it because I don't want to disparage it. By the way, so excited that we have all these English versions. Remember, if you're doing Bible study, you don't have access to the Hebrew, you can just get all of the English versions involved and just make sure you read all of them, and where they diverge from one another, there's an issue, and you should probably do a little extra research. But one of the versions says water will flow from their buckets, and their seed is in many waters.
So plural.
Plural.
Yeah.
right? So that particular version is reading this as referencing to Israel instead of somebody else, the his. Now, I hate to do this, but we have to get into this thing called grammar. I know this will throw a lot of us, but we have to do this because, of course, this is what the text is made up of. We want to sharpen the way that the church reads her foundational text, and as laborious as some of these details can be, we need to do it. So the noun is what a pronoun refers to, right? This is called, the pronoun's antecedent. And in Hebrew, words can be grammatical singular or grammatical plural. And you can actually have a grammatical singular word, but it refer to a plural, right? Like the word people, right? People can be a grammatical singular, and so can take a singular pronoun, but really refer to a plural. And indeed, that's what this one version is seeing here. Okay? So they're reading it there. All right? Now, we could also talk briefly about what does this mean that water will flow from his buckets and his seed is in many waters. This phrase is not repeated again or explained, so I don't want to make too much of a big deal of it here, but I think it just means abundance. It means many offspring.
Okay.
And again, it at this point probably relates back to Israel encamped below them. All right. Now, this is going to be the next clause here is where it's going to get a little tricky. So I'm going to have you read verse 7 again. Read your first two clauses and then read the third clause, but then stop.
Okay. Water will flow from his buckets, and his seed will be by abundant water. His king will be greater than Agag.
All right, very good. So now, all of a sudden, we have his king will be greater than Agag. And we could ask the question, indeed, I think you asked this question in the pilot episode, where did this idea of king come from?
Yeah, because they don't have a king.
They don't have a king, and they won't have a king for 400 years, at least from the perspective here of Moses. And so we could really ask, where does this king come from? Again, I think we talked about its relationship to Numbers 23, which we're going to get into momentarily. But more importantly, we need to keep our eyes on this pronoun, because the version, again, that reads these as plurals says their king will be greater than Agag. And the question is, okay, if it's their king, then are we talking about David, or are we talking about some king who would come in the future? Still a possibility. But what I want us to notice here, again, is this his king or their king? And then I want us to note, Balaam is clear. There is going to be a king who will come. There's no doubt about it. You know, last time we talked about a scepter, which represented or symbolized a king. But here we just have the word. His king will be greater than Agag. So again, this is going to be some great king who's coming in the last days, and he's greater than Agag.
Yeah. So why does this, maybe we'll get into it, but why does this really matter as far as, is it his, is it their? When you're just reading, you're doing your own personal devotion in the morning, you're reading through and you see his king, you might flip through another text, another translation, and it says there.
Yeah.
I mean, someone might not even think anything about that.
Yeah.
But how does that unintentionally affect our understanding?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for saying it like that, because I think it's really the next clause that is going to make all the difference. Okay. But again, let me just summarize here. Really, at this point, whether it's his or their, still talking about a king from Israel, we could say, who's going to come and, again, be greater or higher, more exalted than Agag, right? Who is, again, another king in another context, all right? So now let's read the next clause. And again, sorry, again, let me apologize. We're going to have to stay really close to the pronouns here, all right?
Okay, well, his king will be greater than Agag, and his kingdom will be exalted.
All right. So here is the important point. Who has a kingdom? A king has a kingdom. So the pronoun, his kingdom, is very important to recognize. This is the king's kingdom, right? Because the idea of a king was introduced in the previous clause. So now that version literally says their kingdom. So it does not read the singular here.
Yeah.
So again, just to summarize, in verse 7, obviously it's fine to read the plural, right? There, because it's could be talking about Israel, and we could have that relationship between the noun and the pronoun that we talked about. Even in this third clause, his king will be greater than Agag. It could still be fine to read it because it's still talking about a king,
Right.
and it could possibly be there.
Yeah.
But the king can't be there. Notice the king cannot be a plural.
Right, exactly.
The king is definitely a singular. We're definitely talking about an individual. And once you introduce the idea of a king, well, it's a king who has a kingdom, right? So this cannot be their kingdom. So if you're reading along in your devotional, whatever, you see their kingdom, you're thinking, oh, well, I guess this is just the nation of Israel that is important here. But no, he's talking here about this king, again, coming in the last days, and his kingdom is going to be exalted.
Wow.
All right. So again, that's the importance here. And again, if we knew the rest of the story of the Pentateuch, we would know this is the seed of Abraham. This is the seed of Judah. This is the star of Jacob that, comes out of Jacob. If we kept reading, we would of course, read through David, right? And eventually then we would come to the kind of new David that is, Jesus.
Yeah.
All right. Now, unfortunately, the difficulty doesn't stop with nouns and pronouns, and this is where again we're going to come back and look at chapter 23. But let me have you read the first clause of verse 8. And I hope you guys, I know many of you are probably listening on your way to work or listening while you're working out, and maybe you don't have a Bible in front of you. That's fine. Again, we'll put up some show notes here and some graphics. But if you can, keep your eyes on the clauses. Read really slowly here. All right. So again, verse 8, Nick, the first clause.
Numbers 24, verse 8. God brought him out of Egypt.
All right. Okay. So that's
singular.
Yeah, exactly. God brought him out of Egypt. Or, it'd be interesting if you have another version right here. God brings him out of Egypt. There really is no kind of time orientation here. This is a participle. And again, there's not a tense here, if you will. There's not a past tense.
He is like the horns of a wild ox.
All right. Let me stop you right there, because again, we're going to go back to this first clause. Was there anything different in the other version?
Oh, right. So CSB says God brought him.
Okay.
And ESV says God brings
All right.
him.
Very good. Very good. So ESV picks up on the fact that there really shouldn't be tense here. If you want to know why the CSB probably translated past tense here, even though there's no tense to this particular participle, is because, again, they're influenced by this story, just like the other version is, and how God really did bring Israel out of Egypt, like literally right before in the story. I mean, literally here in Numbers 24, it is 1 year before this. Well, actually, there it's a little bit earlier. It's in the law code where it's 1 year, but we're still in that same unit where God had brought Israel out of Egypt. But this isn't talking about Israel. This is talking about this king. So the ESV says God brings him out of Egypt. Now, the one version that uses plurals here says God brought them out of Egypt.
Oh.
So you can see that they're still reading this story as about Israel. But the text here is not about Israel. The text is about this king who's going to come in the last days. So you can now really get a picture of how devotionally you're reading along.
So God brings this king out of Egypt.
God is bringing or going to bring. There's no reason why this couldn't be a future here.
Yeah.
Right. And indeed, in reality, it is, but it's
prophecy.
talking,
Yeah.
it's prophecy.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is Balaam the prophet. It's talking about the last days. So now we're really getting a difference in our reading.
Mm-hmm.
If you think the text says God brought them out of Egypt, you're like, well, yeah, duh.
We just
right?
read about it.
We just read about it. It is true. And God brought them out of Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot different than saying God will bring this king out of Egypt in the last days. And we're still trying to figure out the identity of this king. All right. Now, what I want to show you comes from Numbers 23. I don't really want to jump back and forth between texts, but if possible, look back at Numbers 23:22. Because here again is the poem, or a little poetic saying, where Balaam is talking about Israel. Because again, don't forget, this is a historical text. It's a historical poem. Balaam's talking about how Jehovah, the Lord, had rescued Israel from Egypt. So, Nick, I want you to read Numbers 23:22.
All right. CSB says, God brought them out of Egypt.
All right, very good. So there you have it. God brought them out of Egypt.
So ESV says God brings them out of Egypt. Is
I
it
would
still
say
the future tense, or
no, I wouldn't say a future tense. I'm fine with is bringing or brings.
yeah?
But in reality, this is talking about
What
the
just
past
happened?
story.
Okay.
And guess what? The pronoun here is plural. In Hebrew, the pronoun is plural.
So it's the same sentence, except now we're plural.
Exact same sentence, except the pronoun is plural. So here, I want us to see here what the author has done. You know how you cut and paste, right? From, like, let's say your smartphone or your computer or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
You cut and paste, right? You put your cursor over a thing and boom, you cut it out, you paste it in another context. That is basically what the author did here with this poem, except he changed one letter in Hebrew, and that changes it from the plural pronoun to the singular pronoun. So we can see the author at work here. We see the author at work here. He changed it from God brought them out of Egypt because he doesn't want to talk about that right now. Instead, he wants to talk about God is bringing him out of Egypt. So again, another detail here that is quite instructive as we read here. We see intelligent design, and that's what we're looking for when we read these texts. We're looking for some sort of design that gives us a clue to what the author is doing. All right. Now, I want to rush on to the next clause in Numbers 24, and we're going to be right back here in Numbers 23 momentarily. But Numbers 24, the second clause of verse 8, and we're going to get multiple versions involved here.
Okay.
All right.
He is like the horns of a wild ox for them.
All right. He is like the horns of a wild ox for them. That's the CSB.
Yep.
Let's hear the ESV.
And is for him like the horns of the wild ox.
All right. All right. And is for him like the horns of a wild ox. All right. We won't go to any other versions, but let me just give you a wooden translation of this. The horns of a wild ox are to him. Or one of the other English versions says he has the horns of a wild ox, because that's what it means. The horns of a wild ox are to him, meaning he has the horns of a wild ox. Okay, now we could say, okay, what in the world?
What are we talking about?
What does that mean? All right, now go back to Numbers 23. We're just in these two passages today, folks. We're not in 6 passages. By the way, love the comments that we've heard from many of you, and keep giving us those comments. Obviously, push subscribe or like on these things. Again, that helps extend the reach of this material, and we really appreciate that. All right. Numbers 23, 22. Go ahead and read what you read, the first clause, and then read the second clause.
God brought them out of Egypt. He is like the horns of a wild ox for them.
All right, that's the CSB.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear the ESV.
God brings them out of Egypt and is for them like the horns of the wild ox.
All right, so let's think about Numbers 23 here for just a moment. What have we said Numbers 23 is about?
Israel.
Israel. And Numbers 23 is referring to Israel as God brought them out of Egypt. That is why Balak is so scared, right? Balak is like this important king of Moab, has a great kingdom. Israel's hardly a people. I mean, Israel just came out of Egypt. They were slaves in Egypt. They've straggled across the desert, the wilderness. And Balak is so worried about them because they're numerous, but they don't really have soldiers, and they're not in battle array yet or anything like that. So we could ask the question, why is Balak afraid? The answer, God, Yahweh, the Lord, brought Israel out of Egypt and was like the horns of a wild ox. And what does a wild ox do? Well, we've all seen these videos of the running of the bulls in Spain. We have our old proverb, he's like a bull in a china closet, right? You might have heard
China
that.
shop.
China shop. Yeah, China shop. Thank you. So what are those references? Well, a bull who has horns is going to do some damage. It's going to do some damage. Whatever is in front of that bull is going to get gored, is going to get stomped, is going to be in trouble. And the author here in Numbers 23, the one who wrote this poem, Balaam, who spoke it, is saying that God brought Israel out of Egypt and destroyed Egypt on the way out. It was like a bull in a china shop. He destroyed Egypt. Okay? In other words, God, Jehovah, the Lord, had these horns and gored and stomped Egypt as he brought Israel out of Egypt.
This is very strong language.
Very strong language. Yeah. And this is what Numbers 23 is referring to. It's referring to, again, this personal name of the Lord Yahweh, who brought Israel out of Egypt. Now, go back over to Numbers 24, because we have another situation where we have cut and paste. We have a cutting and pasting. And this time, we have no changes. Last time, if you remember, we changed from the plural pronoun to the singular pronoun. This time in verse 8, it is the exact same clause. And we need to point that out. This is an entire clause. So it will be interesting. What would be interesting is to see if the versions translate this clause the same from Numbers 24:8 as they do in Numbers 23:22.
I think if anyone's like me that's visual, I'm going to need a graphic of all these that we're talking about.
So I'm going to have, you can put the graphic up, Nick, from this, and hopefully it'll help sort this all out. All right, so one more time. Now we're in Numbers 24. Remember, we're not talking about the people. We're talking about this king that God is going to bring out in the future. And this king is going to be exalted, and he's going to be greater than Agag. All right, Nick, Numbers 24:8.
He is like the horns of a wild ox for them.
Okay, go ahead and start at the beginning of verse 8. We'll just get that context.
God brought him out of Egypt. He is like the horns of a wild ox for them.
All right. So again, the CSB adds now for them. Again, almost in a confusing sort of way. It's like, who's the for them? Is he talking about Israel? Or how about the ESV? What's the ESV do here?
God brings him out of Egypt And is for him like the horns of the wild ox.
All right, so the ESV now, notice, is saying that God is for this king like the horns of a wild ox. All right, now I want to give you the Hebrew.
Wait, so there's no for them.
There's no really for them.
Okay.
The CSB is reading the for him as a for them. The CSB is kind of translating this twice.
Yeah.
There.
Interesting.
Yeah. But the ESV is picking up on the previous clause and saying that God, who brought this one out of Egypt, is now for this one like the horns of a wild ox. But that's not what the Hebrew says. So the Hebrew, the ESV, has something different as well.
Yeah.
All right. Here's the Hebrew. And there is an English version that says this. I just don't have that pulled up here. You can look around for the English versions and check me. So here it is. God is bringing him from Egypt, and he has the horns of a wild ox. Or the horns of a wild ox are to him. In other words, he has the horns of a wild ox.
This king coming out of Egypt.
This king coming out of Egypt. In other words, the author, I get goosebumps on this. This king coming out of Egypt, who's going to have an exalted kingdom, who's going to be raised higher than Agag, is described in the same way that Yahweh is described as he brought Israel out of Egypt. So now this king who's coming in the last days is described as Yahweh.
Wow.
He's likened to Yahweh. And if we need any other evidence, you can just read the next line here in verse 8. He will eat the nations, his adversaries. Their bones he will gnaw. He's going to smash them with his arrows. So this is the king who has the horn of a wild ox. He's going to destroy the nations. And this is, again, just what we read in Genesis 49, that the nations, he's going to judge the nations. He's going to be victorious over the nations. He's going to gnaw their bones, and literally he's going to eat them. I mean, again, harsh language.
Yeah, very.
And now it is described of this king. So, devotionally, as we think about this, we have a decision really in front of us. How are we going to relate to this king? I mean, when I teach this material in my class, I basically give an invitation at this point. Because a lot of times we don't think of this king, seed of Abraham, we could say, Jesus. We don't think of him like this. We think of him nice. He's got kind of long flowing hair, might be blonde or kind of jaundiced, right? We think of him as just, he's a nice teacher. He's a good person. He's loving.
Yeah.
But this is really not describing him in that manner. And of course, there's various pictures of Jesus, of this king in the Old Testament, but here's one of them. All right. Now, before we really conclude here, before we wrap up, I want you to go ahead and read verse 9, because again, that is going to basically clinch this. I'm going to let you read. First of all, I'm going to let you read the first two clauses.
Yep.
I'm just going to say a quick word. Go ahead.
He crouches. He lies down like a lion or a lioness. Who dares to rouse him?
All right. So again, quick point here. This is the lion imagery that we saw in Genesis 49:10. So now we can kind of see that the author keeps repeating himself in these key places in the poem. We've got in the last days, we've got lion imagery, we've got king language, we've got doing judgment to the nations and things like this. All right, so there's the lion imagery. This is why we call these the Lion King poems. All right, second half of verse 9.
Those who bless you will be blessed, and those who curse you will be cursed.
All right, so here, if you know much about the book of Genesis, this is going to sound like a very familiar phrase, because this is the blessing to Abraham in Genesis 12:3.
Yeah.
The one's blessing you, I will bless, and the one who curses you, I will curse. And This is the blessing of Isaac to Jacob, word for word, out of Genesis 27:29. So we now know here, again, this is like a hyperlink, right? I mean, Tim Mackey from the Bible Project talks about these hyperlinks that you might see in text from time to time. I really like that language because this is like a hyperlink, right to Genesis 12:3 and right to Genesis 27:29. So if there's any doubt about who this king is, this would put it to rest. It's the seed of Abraham.
Okay, so let me back up.
All right.
So we have Genesis 1, where we have in the beginning, and you're tying that word, which is reshit, to the aharit, which is in the last days, which appears in multiple poems throughout
poems
throughout the Pentateuch. They all have the same kind of themes throughout.
Yep.
They all point to a king.
Yep.
They all point back to Genesis language, to Abrahamic language, so the seed of Abraham.
Yep.
There's a king coming. We're not talking about Israel plural. We're talking about a singular future king. And this is what we look to is going to be Jesus eventually.
Yep.
So we know that. If the readers here, are they reading it as they're connecting? Are they supposed to connect the dots? Do you think they would have connected the dots that, these 3 poems, the original readers, that they would have seen this repeated theme and been like, oh, we're talking about a future king?
Yeah, great question. Great question. And again, this is where I think we need to think again about who is this for? Who did the author write this for? And we know the author is talking about the last days. So the author has in mind, we could say, the last days.
And we say the last days are when Jesus comes, has arrived and passed.
Yeah, that's what the New Testament says, right? And that's what I would say as well, right? So again, from the point of this author, right? This author obviously is written a millennia or more before that, right? So he's talking about the future. So he doesn't know at this point. I don't really think he knew the name Jesus.
Right.
He just thinks this is the seed of Abraham. This is the seed of Judah. This is the star of Jacob. These are all terms here that we see in these poems. And it's the Lion King.
And he's also God.
Well, we don't know that yet, but we are going to know that in our next episode.
Okay.
We're going to know that. That's what we're going to cover in our next episode.
And then one more thing about this verse that we just read, and those who bless you will be blessed, those who curse you will be cursed. That gets maybe thrown around or used a lot. We're just talking about, current day Israel. That's maybe just not to get into the weeds on that, but maybe the way that is used nowadays is not the implications of the text here.
Well, I mean, this is a great question. This is why interpretation really matters, because if we're interpreting this as meaning the nation of Israel, right? If this is their kingdom, or, if they are kind of these kings, if we could say, or they are these priests, then that would be referring to Israel. But again, that's not what this text says. This text says that it is about this king. So those who would bless this king will be blessed. Those who would curse this king would be cursed. So here, again, another major implication.
That's huge.
That
actually.
are, again, not to get in the weeds here.
Yeah.
But our national politics shouldn't view this verse as talking about the modern nation state. This is where interpretation really matters, folks. And I want you to come back in our next episode where we show how the Bible is for you and about you as we discuss the next poem in Numbers 24:16 and following.